So I don't think we're done with presidents and civil rights because there are, or there will be, 47 presidents. Yeah. I don't know why I thought I was done. Maybe I wanted to be done, but I don't know why I want it to be done when there are a few presidents I wanted to talk about. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're going to talk about them. So the plan is we will continue to talk about presidents and civil rights while doing other lessons that I have planned as well. We'll go back and forth. Sound good? Good. Uh, since we're on the topic of presidents, let's talk about one of them now. Yeah. Now, I have to admit to being ashamed of forgetting this particular president the first time we were discussing presidents and civil rights. I don't know how I managed to forget JFK. I'm ashamed of myself. I really am. He's the reason we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So let's talk about JFK and civil rights. Now, John F. Kennedy, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was born outside Boston in Brookline, Massachusetts on May 29th, 1917. I believe he was one of 8 children. His father, maternal grandfather, and paternal grandfather, all of them were politicians. And if you knew anything about his family, his father intended for his sons to be politicians. One of his sons was going to be great if he had anything to do. He One of his sons was going to be great. Okay? Okay. JFK graduated from Harvard in 1940, joined the Navy during World War II. He came back from the war and became a Democratic congressman in 1947. He did that until 1953. From that point, he joined the Senate. And of course, we cannot forget that he married Jacqueline Bouvier in 1953. Jackie O. Now, this is important, okay? Because he ran for president in 1960. Just weeks before the 1960 election, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested while leading a protest in Atlanta, Georgia. John Kennedy phoned his wife, Coretta Scott King, to express his concern, while a call from Robert Kennedy to the judge helped secure her husband's safe release. The Kennedys' personal intervention led to a public endorsement by Martin Luther King Sr. The publicizing of this endorsement, combined with other campaign efforts, contributed to increased support among Black voters for Kennedy. Now, at the time, Martin Luther King Jr. was supporting Nixon, who did not call while he was in jail. Okay. Across the nation, almost 70% of Black people voted for Kennedy, and these votes provided the winning edge in several key states. Kennedy would be sworn in as the 35th president in 1961 after beating Richard Nixon. Kennedy became president right in the middle of the civil rights movement and just after the Supreme Court's verdict in Brown versus the Board of Education. They said that separate but equal was a joke and told the South to desegregate their schools, and the South said no. Blacks faced significant discrimination in the United States. Throughout much of the South, they were denied the right to vote, barred from public facilities, subjected to violence, including lynching, and could not expect justice from the courts because what was happening in the South? I know some of you know because you've been to my TikTok lives, you've been to my lectures. I know you know. Jim Crow. That's right. Jim Crow and legalized segregation. Blacks had no hope for equality in the South. Now, in the North, blacks also faced discrimination in housing, employment, education, and many other areas. Oh, yeah, they had Jim Crow in the North. It just didn't have the name Jim Crow. It wasn't legalized, it wasn't by law in the North. It just happened that way. Yeah. Blacks were demanding equality. They were demanding the rights that the Constitution gave them. Now, this was probably new for Kennedy, considering he came from Massachusetts. I don't know why it was new for him, since Boston was one of the most segregated cities in the United States, and they threw a fit when they had to desegregate their schools, but that's a separate conversation. Historian David Halberstam wrote that the race question was for a long time a minor ethnic political issue in Massachusetts. And it was until they were forced to desegregate their schools. And that was not until the 70s. Kennedy favored desegregation and other civil rights causes, but he generally did not place a high priority on civil rights, especially before 1963. He initially took a more cautious stance on civil rights, prioritizing enforcement of existing laws over creating new ones. Kennedy believed the grassroots movement for civil rights would anger many Southern whites. It's always about appeasing the South. He thought it would anger many Southern whites and make it more difficult to pass civil rights laws in Congress, and he distanced himself from it. His brother Robert Kennedy said that the administration's early priority was to keep the president out of this civil rights mess. When it came to civil rights, Kennedy had to work around the Southern Democrats. All the presidents did. They wielded a lot of power. Recognizing that conservative Southern Democrats could block legislation, Kennedy did not introduce civil rights legislation upon taking office. He needed their support to pass his economic and foreign policy agendas and to support his reelection in 1964. However, Kennedy did appoint many blacks to office, including civil rights attorney Thurgood Marshall to the U.S. Court of Appeals and Abraham Bolden, the first black Secret Service agent. And he ordered his attorney general to submit Friends of the Court briefs on behalf of civil rights litigants. He also strengthened the Civil Rights Commission. He spoke out in favor of school desegregation, praised a number of cities for integrating their schools, and put Vice President Lyndon Johnson in charge of the President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity. Attorney General Robert Kennedy turned his attention to voting rights, initiating 5 times the number of suits brought during the previous administration. Tomorrow, we'll discuss how Kennedy was forced to deal with civil rights issues like desegregation.